was the first thing I did that felt this is me putting a stamp into my life, and it doesn't make any sense to anybody else. It doesn't make any sense to myself neither if I think it rational, because I was already 28, 29. I was an accountant in PwC. I had a very stable life, and I put myself into being a student surrounded by 21 years old European students. So it felt in some way like doesn't make too much sense. It's not a rational decision. But for me, it felt like, okay, this is me being me, and it's like what my soul is asking for, and I'm responding, even if it doesn't make any sense.
Welcome to the Pivoting Wolf. Open conversations with interesting people from varying backgrounds across several different countries around the world. Hello, everybody. This is Rhonda Harris, and I'm coming to you with a new episode of the Pivoting Wolf podcast. And today, my guest is Isabel Fonseca. Isabel is originally from Uruguay, but she's been living in Europe for the past 7 years, with the last 2 being here in the Netherlands in Amsterdam. Isabel says that from a young age, she's always had a desire to make an impact with her career. Today, she is an ICF certified career development and leadership coach with a focus on helping women advance their careers with what she says is authenticity and confidence. Isabel has over 13 years of experience in finance and risk management and has worked with major corporations across various countries. These experiences have given her valuable insights into the unique challenges that women face in the corporate setting. She says that her mission is to support women in bringing their true selves to work, and in doing so, she wants to help create new, healthier role models for women in leadership. So without further ado, Isabel, thank you so much for joining me today, and I welcome you to the Pivoting Wolf podcast. And just to get us started, can you tell me a little bit about what you're deeply passionate about?
Yeah. Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm very excited to have this conversation together. And yes, I'm deeply passionate. I think what I mentioned before about supporting women into creating new models of leadership, into creating new ways of dealing with our careers. And yes, it's something I think I have been always passionate about women and women supporting women as well.
Yeah, I know. I recently attended a workshop that you did, and I found it quite fascinating. And I was quite impressed with the amount of research that you did when you were sharing this information with our group. And it really made me stop and reflect about my own experiences across a few decades of being in various roles. I've been in leadership roles in the past, and I've also gone through a lot of career changes. So I really get the whole career advancement thing. And it just made me think about my own unique experiences and how they may have been different, just from a woman's perspective. So I really appreciate the work that you put into that and the research that you brought to that workshop. And if you have some information that you want to share with me that I can add to this description of this video, I would be happy to share that, because I think that more people would benefit from attending those sessions that you do. So thank you for that. One thing that I asked you in the questionnaire that I gave you was, what's been your pivot experience? And I really like what you said here, and I'm going to let you answer in your own words. But you used a phrase called tower moments. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, I borrowed that phrase from the tarot actually, and I'm not a tarot expert or anything like that, but I love reading about those things, and I have read about the symbols that they use in some way, and for some reason, like I got really interested in that one, in the Tower card. So the Tower card is a card where like the tower is literally falling, so it's a moment where everything is falling apart. And it's also, I love how you say pivot moment as well, because it's like also the starting of something new, something different. And sometimes we have those moments in life, and the one I shared with you was the grief of my mom. So I lost my mom to cancer when I was 26, and it was a moment where everything fell apart. Until then I have a very nice life and very predictable in some way. I was following everything to the plan I had in my head, and with that happening, everything started falling apart, and I was not as sure as my way going forward. And and I think those are those moments that I actually get a bit excited when I'm a coach and somebody is in those moments, because I think they bring so much beginnings. But of course, in the middle of the moment is very chaotic, and it can be quite challenging to go through those changes in life, and to go through also uncertainty, because we don't really know what we're building, but we know that everything is falling apart, and sometimes we even have resistance to that falling apart because we don't like it, we don't like endings, we don't like grieving. So yeah, a little bit of that.
Yeah, I know you did explain quite a bit how painful it was to lose your mom, and the things that you had gone through during that period of time, and reading how grief pushed you into a deeper personal and spiritual journey. I was quite impressed with how well you articulated that, because sometimes when we get in that space, like you said, it is very chaotic, and it can be difficult just to even articulate how we're feeling, and maybe this was something that you were able to do after the fact, but maybe not so much while you were necessarily going through it. But you mentioned reconnecting with practices that your mom had introduced to you. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because that might be helpful for people who might find themselves in a similar situation.
Yeah, yes, and I completely agree with you. In the moment, I think things are easier to articulate. One took me really, like, I think the first 2 years to connect with that sadness, because it was so big that I couldn't deal with it from the beginning. So it really took a process to even realize how broken I was, and to really connect with those pieces. And my mom, well, my mom was a doctor, but she was also a Reiki master, and she was into alternative medicine. And since I was very young in time, she introduced me to meditation, where we didn't even call it meditation. It was an audio I used to use before sleeping, because I have sleeping problems since I was a child. And she also took me to yoga when I was a child and a teenager. And for a long time, I, of course, like, I was growing up, so I reject all those practices from my mom. Um, because I wanted to be different, and I think I'm so similar to her that for a long time that was my fight, to be different to her. And once she was not here, I found healing in coming back to those practices. So I start, and since then they are in my routine. I start back into meditation, into breath work, into yoga, and after a while even into coaching. So that was my way of coming back to myself and to dealing with this pain as well.
Yeah, that. Thank you for so much for sharing that. And in addition to that, I wanted to ask you. You mentioned that leaving your country. After all of that grief that you went through, and then you left your country, and um, you know that was a really super tough decision. I mean, you've got to be an incredibly strong person to go through all of those things, and then now you're leaving your country, to pursue. I heard you say earlier what you had in your head that was going to be your path. Can you share with me a little bit about that? I happen to have a personal interest in talking about the paths that we get kind of influenced to get on when we're particularly growing up. We're influenced by our family, our parents, society. Oh, you should do this, you should pursue this career, that career. Because looking at your background, you've got quite an extensive background with, a very serious work that you did, and very corporate. And now I see the passion coming through in what you're doing today. So I kind of wanted to talk about how did that pivot start to materialize and manifest? I know that the grief from your mom, you had mentioned to me previously, kind of put you in that direction. But tell me, what finally clicked for you and made you decide, you know what, I'm gonna leave this behind, and I'm gonna to get on a completely different path and do something totally different. Um, and while you're sharing that with me, I know it's a kind of a two-pronged question, but while you're sharing that with me, what was the experience of deciding to do that juxtaposed against what we often are influenced to do? Like, I'm sure there was a voice in your head like, no, you need to do the job security corporate path, but then you've got this burning passion to do something else. Just how did all of that work out? Like, what was the click point, and how did you deal with the little voice that we all have that tries to keep us from doing those things that we want to do the most?
Yes. Yeah, so from there to here, it has been a decade. So I think I also mentioned to you, like, that was the first pivot point or pivot moment, but it hasn't been the only one. And there have been a few of them. And in some way, I think the more I go through them, the better I am in dealing with them or knowing how they look like. So what that was the first one I was quite aware of, because until then I was, as was saying, like really living my life from my head and from my shoots and from how it should be. And I think in some way, and that's why the reason I'm really passionate about talking about grief, because I think we don't talk enough about it. So it was really a very lonely process for me and also for my family. When you're grieving and your family is also grieving, like there is not too much they can support you because they are also going through it. And you are quite alone into society. I don't think we are really talking about these topics, even if I find it very surprising, because it's something that at some point we all will face. um, but the process of being so close to death, I'm really grateful to it. And when I say this, it's not that I wish my mom died. Of course, if I had a choice, I wouldn't go for that choice. But that's the thing. I didn't have a choice. So I think there was a moment where I really asked myself, okay, is this would be this the thing that will ruin your life forever, or would this be the thing that you use as a fuel to make something fulfill for you? And one of the things that from my mom's dying was that when she said goodbye to me and my sister, it was a very hard moment, because she was fighting as a lioness through her life. But at some point, they told her there was nothing to do, and immediately she died. She went into a coma, and then, like in a few days, it was done. But before doing that, she still had the strength enough to say goodbye. And one of the things that hit me was she was so proud and happy of the life that she was living. Then, of course, she wanted to continue it. And of course, she was kind of angry and sad it was finishing, but she felt fulfilled. And I think I remember at that point, I asked myself, would I feel the same? And my answer was no. Like I didn't feel I had really put my sign into the world. I didn't feel like there was a stamp into my life that said like, okay, this is Isabel or Isa, how usually people call me. I didn't felt that. I felt I was following checklist. I was following, as you were saying, a long list of shoots that were in my head and from everywhere, but there was nothing that was like really, okay, this is me. This is like very different from any other person, and it's just like me living my in my way. Um, so that's how I arrived to the decision of leaving my country, and I had a really nice life, and I'm very fan of my country. It's not that I was miserable and I hated it. No, it was not that the case. I think it's a beautiful country and I love going back. But there was something inside that told me like my path is somewhere else. And I had that voice for a long time since I was young. Even I wanted to study abroad. I wanted to experience living in another place, talking another language. It was something my soul was asking for. And I think I was also craving diversity. I love Europe because we are from two different countries, and here we are talking, and this is it has come to be a normal thing for me. And at some point, it was like a dream. I used to read about other cultures, and yeah, and now I get the chance to actually talk to people that belong to those cultures. Um, so yes, I think that was kind of the click at some point, and the decision to leave and to go to study to another country was the first thing I did that felt this is me putting a stamp into my life, and it doesn't make any sense to anybody else. It doesn't make any sense to myself neither. If I think it rational, because I was already 28, 29. I was an accountant in PwC. Um, I had a like very stable life, and I put myself into being a student surrounded by 21 years old European students. So it felt in some way like doesn't make too much sense. It's not a rational decision. But for me, it felt like, okay, this is me being me, and it's like what my soul is asking for, and I'm responding, even if it doesn't make any sense. And I think that's the difference. And I don't think the change was easy. Like it's not like I decided I went to Ireland, everything went smooth. No, I was crying for a few months in the library because I was struggling with studying finance in English, talking in English the entire day. It gave me a headache. I have struggled with the cultural difference with the people, even if I wanted to experience other cultures. When the shocks came, of course, it was different. But I think that was the difference. That every time I was down or I felt bad about it or I was struggling, I was like, okay, but this is me doing things my way, and that was the difference with before, I think.
Wow, that is so amazing. I just want to comment on, what I really pull from that, like the message fully encapsulated is that was you being you, like you said, um, even when at times it didn't make sense to you, and you responding to it. That is so amazing because I'm included in this group, but unfortunately, I believe that there's too many of us that we don't respond to that. And we go for years, decades, whatever, not being us, not being our authentic selves. And, that's kind of where I started to find my passion, was trying to help people cross that bridge from doing the status quo to like paying attention. And first of all, having the self awareness to even understand who you are, and so that you could even begin to think about you being you, for example. And then, of course, the most difficult part is to respond to that and act on it. So, I commend you for that. That's incredible what you did. I mean, moving to a new country, learning to speak the language. I mean, wow, what a go getter you are. That's incredible. But you know what? Change is uncomfortable, isn't it? It's very uncomfortable, but it's necessary. And it's like there's there's a phrase that I like to think about. I think it's really a good reminder. The pain of change becomes nothing compared to the pain of not changing. Just imagine, because I think that if you think about staying in your comfort zone, that's immediate gratification, right? But in the long run, like, there's nothing like the sting of regret, you know. And it really touched me when you talked about how your mom um, was proud of the life that she lived. And then you asked yourself that question, like, do I feel the same way? And like just the level of self awareness to even ask that question in the first place is quite remarkable. And yeah, not oversimplifying, because like you said, it was a process. This happened over a period of time. But just the fact that you even initiated those thoughts and started thinking in that direction, and that you took action, is incredible. And touching back to your point of, your passion, helping women advance their careers and things of that nature, I feel like these are the things that we need to help women tap into. Wouldn't you think? I mean, like that's, I know I'm a coach as well, and it's amazing to me how many powerful people I run into. They have incredible gifts. They have incredible potential, but they just are disconnected from it in a way. And, maybe they need like a tad of whatever you've got going on, this go getter stuff. I think we all have it in us. We just have to tap into it and get people to help us see it. And then have the strength and the courage to move forward and respond, like you said. So that was a really great journey that you described for us. Thank you so much for that. Um, Speaking of navigating life changes, I mean, I had asked you, about the support systems that you recommend for navigating life changes. And of course, you did mention that you're biased. I think we both are, professional help, whether it's, psychological help or even, with coaching. Um, but I liked what you said here that when you began to share your experiences, you recognize that opening up about your experiences allowed you to connect with others who had faced similar challenges. And then you said that it's intriguing how grief is a universal experience. And I think that you are correct in that it's potentially something, I think it's, tell me what you think about this. I think people shy away from it. It's uncomfortable. They don't know really how to talk about grief. And I think also there might even be some misconceptions about what grief is. Grief is not necessarily only related to death or the loss of a loved one. I mean, we can grieve past experiences. Um, we can grieve a lot of different things in a lot of different ways. But I think that getting in touch with that raw emotion of grief, however it came about, is can be a catalyst for getting on a path of change. Do you want to comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, yes, and I think I agree with you that I think as a society we're not talking enough about things, and I think as a society we also reject endings, so we don't like endings, even death, and like death is part of life, is part of nature, but we reject it, and we kind of reject that part of the process where things die and that they leave place to something else. But if you look in nature, it's all around us. And for example, now we're starting to die in nature, and to go into that, like, but even that we hate it. We hate winter, and I'm as well. So I think as a society, we have learned into hating this part of the process that is not like the light, it's more like the darkness, it's more the passive part, it's more like, and we're really uncomfortable with it. And that was for me, I was very uncomfortable with my grief, very uncomfortable with my pain. And it was also uncomfortable for other people, so they didn't know how to deal with, and that made that I had to deal with it more alone in some way, because I couldn't share it a lot. I learned very early in the process that people didn't understand me. So people was very supportive in the first, well, in the funeral, in the first week, maybe in the first month, but 6 months after, whenever I bump into tears for that, people was surprised I was still dealing with it. And uh, and it took me years, not months. So it's way a longer process than what we think. And I think a lot of us leave that in secret. And for me, it was really important, of course, as I said, like the professional support. I went into therapy immediately, and my sister as well. And I think it was one of the key decisions that we make in the process. But as well, it was very important when I start finding the people that actually live through that as well, because I could feel a different level of understanding. They knew what I was going through. They knew how I was feeling, especially when it has passed after time. And it was a really safe space for me to acknowledge those feelings and to really express my emotions. Because I think also grief takes a lot of energy. So that year I was way more tired. That year, I mean, the first 2 years actually, I was way more tired. I was way more disconnected with myself. It was kind of like anesthesia in some moments. I felt I was laughing, but I didn't really feel things were funny. I was disconnected with my emotions, all of them. So it took me um, time to start connecting back to my emotions, to the pain, but also to happiness, to joy. It took some time, and yeah, it was really important to have to find the people that I could share that part with. And yes, and that's actually how the women's circle start, because we start in talking about those feelings that we usually don't acknowledge or talk about with other people, and we start seeing like how, okay, like we actually didn't have these spaces available for us where we can come as women and talk about how, not only how the challenges, also the victories, because sometimes it's also hard to share victories and like feel truly engaged by others. But yeah, but also those moments where we were not ourselves, where life was being challenging, and that we had the space to share.
So on and I'm so glad that you mentioned the women's circle, and you know, and you really touched on some really important points here. You know, it is really important to have that sense of community, and you know, it's it's so important. Um, but I want to change gears a little bit and segue into, you know, tell me a little bit more about, you know, this whole experience that you've had, and you know how your it has shaped you into becoming the entrepreneur that you are now, with this incredible mission that you have. So can you talk to me about how these themes show up in professional transitions? You know, since you are dedicated to career development and leadership, because I saw that you mentioned, you know, navigating personal and professional transitions. I'm particularly keen to start with the professional transitions. You know, what are some themes that you've been seeing as a coach, that keep showing up, when you're working with the women in the women's circle and that you want to share that's of in
Yes,
significance
and
to
I
you?
think it was also a little bit what you mentioned before. So a lot of my work is supporting people to really understand who they are and bring themselves into their careers. And it's a bit what I was doing in the last decade, really understanding, yeah, what is my way of doing things, and this became into a bigger project in the way that I think also women as a collective, we are going through that process at the moment. So we joined the workplace not too long ago in the last century. And first we joined because men were in the war, so it was out of need. And then we stayed there being technically qualified. So that's the way we start going into that work. And and I think we have been trying in some way since then to lead like men and to progress like men. And we have been seeing that it doesn't work for most of us, with a higher rates of burnout for women than for men. And of course, I think the system is not working for anybody. So I think this is more like a system shift in some way. But in the middle of that, I also think as female, we're also trying to find ourselves and trying to see how can we make our career advancement and leadership in a way that feels that it's us, and it's not that we are trying to be something we are not, and we're trying to fit um, into a male model that is even an outdated male model, because it's not even from now. It's from 50 years ago, where men had a woman in at the house that was taking care of home, so they could take care only about their work life. So that doesn't exist for anybody anymore. So it's outdated even for men. But yes, I think that's what we are going on at the moment. We're trying to figure out who we are and how can we lead from a place that feels authentic, and that we don't have to tune into our masculine energy all the time, because we have both, and we can bring also the feminine side into work. So that's a little bit of the work I do. And the transition to this, of course, that was a decade of inner work, and of finding myself, and of finding what are my own strengths and what are my own passions at work. And as I always say, the transition is not from one day to the other one. It took different positions, and what I noticed was that in each position and in each of these tower moments that I mentioned before, I was aligning every time more, and I'm sure there are few to come because I'm not ending my story now. So that's what I noticed, that every time that something was falling in some way, it was a chance for me to align it a bit more. And that was how my profession was shifting as well. So even through finance, my first position as a consultant was completely different that when I started working in Dublin, and that was also completely different than when I work here. So every time I knew myself better, and I could adapt the work to myself instead of myself adapting to the work. So I was already working in improvement and collaboration. I was already doing things related to mindfulness in the companies I was before. So that's something I usually highlight, because sometimes we stuck ourselves in the all or nothing mentality. So either I go for my dreams and I have my company, or either I stay in corporate and I like die bored and frustrated. And I don't think there is really, like, I think there is a lot of place in the grace, and there is lots of possibilities in the middle. And the transitions usually are like adapting each time a little bit more until you feel ready, or until life takes you into that jump, but it doesn't have to be from one day to the other one. And it was, for me, it was a years of process of really adapting and learning what do I like from the jobs I was doing, because I also didn't hate my career. There was a lot of things that were quite exciting for me, so picking on those ones and doing those every time more, to the point that now I see them and they are all together in some way and they all make sense. But at some point they didn't. It was just me picking up. And I think also there is a lot of pressure sometimes on like finding our purpose, and it has to be one and it has to be monetized and we have to live from it. And I think again that's the very white or black mentality, and it stops us from seeing all the possibilities in the middle. So there was a lot of things that now they make absolutely sense when I look back, but they really start with little interest. As I said, the women's circles was a need for me. um, and now I have built a community in Uruguay and here in the Netherlands. But before it was just like me wanting to do my own moon rituals and having more women to share those things I was processing. Yeah, so I think also, yes, there is a lot of pressure on the passion and the purpose, and it's, for me it's more like a process of like going every time finding it more self, so it's more aligned. And at some point you will look back and it will make sense, but in the moment it might not. It might just like a little shift towards the right direction. And that's a little bit of the work I help women to do, so that every time their career is more aligned to what brings meaning to them, to what is fulfilled for them. And of course it might change also in the future. Sometimes what was purpose now is not purpose in 10 years or in a decade. So it's also like something that is flexible. um,
So it sounds
yeah,
like
I don't know if I answered your
no, no,
question.
I love that. So what I'm taking away from that, which is actually, I'm learning something new myself because I tend to be all or nothing. That's just a habit that I've still struggle with. But I really like the way you described that because it sounds like, as far as a professional transition or any, you know, um, it sounds like you took bits and bytes from different jobs along the way and you made incremental changes and that you remained open, that you might change your mind along the way, and you maintained a level of appreciation and gratitude for what you had, and you took the best from various different places, and then you turn the dial this way, then you turn the dial back that way, and incrementally over time then the picture starts to clear, and then you start to figure out what your purpose is, at least for now. Again, keep maintaining an open mind that that could change next year or 5 years from now, and being okay with that. I really took away from what you were saying that there is a lot of pressure on, find your purpose and your passion, monetize it, da 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 da, and there can only be one. And that's a real big stickler for me because you are correct. I mean, that is kind of that does seem to be the message that we send our young people. It's like pick their one thing, and like, because I know back in historically speaking, there was a time when you would just pick one career, stick with it, get a job, work there till you retire, end of story, and that couldn't be any further from the truth these days. Um, but I did have a question for you, if you don't mind articulating a little bit. When you talked about, you went briefly into the history of women coming into the workplace and prompted by need after the, during the war and things of that nature, and then we stayed. You mentioned that there's a male work model that may not necessarily work for women, and can you explain what you mean by that for people who may not understand? Well, what does that mean exactly? What give us some examples of what you mean when you say there's like you mentioned the masculine energy, feminine energy, and tell us more. What exactly do you mean like that? What does it look like for a woman to be in a workplace and not fitting into a traditional male dominated type of working type of model? What exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah. Yes, so I think we, and of course, this is also my opinion, right? This is all about how I perceive it. Yeah, so I think we went into the corporate world, and I think we have made a great job advancing, but to a very big cost. That is our feminine side or energy. So just to leave a little bit of feminine and masculine energies are what we refer to, and it even taps back to the point of grief and our rejection to this dark side. So the universe, the world, and everything has two. We're run by two energies, right? Like expand and contract, and they can be called like masculine and feminine or yang and yin. So it's these two energies that run absolutely everything, and we can see it in nature. For example, the sun and the day and the night, the sun and the moon. So this kind of two opposite running this whole nature. And the cycles that are between, right? So, for example, now we are in transition from a very young season, that is the summer, very outward, very extrovert, to a more introvert, inward, that is the winter, and this is a transition period. Um, so these two energies run absolutely everything. The yang energy or more masculine energy is characterized by being like linear, by being like light, by being a very active energy, productive, efficient. So this is kind of that energy that we need, of course. And then the counter energy is more like yin energy, is characterized by being passive, darkness, compassion, emotions are more related to that. Motherhood is more related um, to that kind of compassion and care, and more like passive and calm, nurturing energy. So that's why, for example, we said the winter is very yin energy, and really like everything is growing under the surface. But doesn't mean it's not growing, and that's the idea we have. But it's under surface, it's in the darkness. So um, the world that we live is a patriarchy system, so we have put all the energy into this young energy. So we want things to be productive, efficient, linear. We think things are linear, goes just like straight, logical, analytical, that are very young qualities or masculine qualities, and we have in some way reward those. Whenever we are being active, we feel good about ourselves. Whenever we are resting, we feel bad, we feel lazy. We reject those parts of the process. So we reject when we feel down, and we really reward when we are bright, we're positive, we're and it's this rejection that has also which has reject all the feminine qualities as well. So for a long time, because this is a patriarchy system, we have reward the more masculine side, and we have reject these feminine qualities. And I think when we went into the workplace, we tap into more this masculine, so we became more productive, we became more efficient, and we were before going into the workplace, we were used to have more nurturing roles. So we would take care of the children. We were good managers because we were managing the resources at home. So that was kind of our traditional roles in some way, and they were very attuned with our energies. And that doesn't mean that we don't have masculine energy, because we do have that go-getter as well. But I think the entering into the workplace cost us that we tap more into that energy, the yang energy, and sometimes we even don't allow us to feel or to tap into our yin energy. That is like a compassion energy. That's not a competitive. It's more a collaborative energy. So I think at the moment we are shifting. I think there is a shift of system, and we have realized this is not sustainable. We're only tapping into one energy, and like nature shows you all the time that you need both, and the process need both sides. And we have put all the like rewards and the energy into like cultivating one side, but that's not sustainable for the earth, for us, for anybody. Um, so I think we are shifting and into female change. That means also coming back into these energies and kind of accepting them and embracing them. And I don't think we have had the place before, and maybe it's also a place that we have to open in some way, and into very practical. What does it mean into the practical days? For example, I was always told, when I was in Uruguay, as a feedback, I was always told that if I wanted people to take me seriously, I had to be stronger, I had to sound stronger. And for a long time, I reject my own voice, and I even tried to sound different, but yeah, very frustratingly, I couldn't. Of course, this is the voice I have, and I was also like, yeah, totally, you're too sweet, you're too calm, and you're very clever. So if you really want to succeed, you should start being more like assertive, sound stronger, talk faster. And of course, it didn't really work for me. This is what I got. And the funny thing was when I moved to Ireland, I had the opposite feedback because of course this also changed with culture. So for that culture, I was actually aggressive, and I thought this is so funny because I have
Yeah.
been putting so much effort into sounding
Yeah,
aggressive.
I've heard that. I've heard that too. I've been told, "Oh, you're too aggressive." It's like, gosh, I can't win, you know.
Exactly,
Um I wanted to
exactly.
just I just wanted to you really touched on some really good points there. I just recently heard someone in a video somewhere. I'd heard some woman talking about how as a female leader, she's not this way anymore because she's adopted and she's adopted new ways of her leadership style. But she was recalling kind of what you were describing, staying late, hanging out with the boys, took up smoking cigars, took up drinking whiskey, and then and anecdotally too. Years ago, I remember there was a lawsuit. I don't remember the name of the corporation, and that's not important. The point is that there was a a woman, or there might have been more than one woman who sued her employer because she missed out on growth opportunities because the whole environment was structured around her male counterparts. Like, for example, having meetings at a golf country club where, believe it or not, women were not allowed. Yeah, once there used to be those types of these men's clubs, or even worse. And I can cringe about this because I've worked in environments where all the guys would get together after work and they're going to the strip club, and it's like, okay, well, you can say that, oh, well, we're just hanging out after work, but we know realistically that's where the deals get cut. That's where networking gets done. That's where the hobnobbing goes. Like, you invite a client. It's real cheesy, but that was very 80s ish. Like a client's coming to town, you're taking them out for a steak dinner, then you're going to take them out for drinks afterwards. A lot of times you end up at the strip club. That's not an environment for a female that's going to want to partake in those kinds of networking opportunities. And technically, even though it might be after hours, the reality is that this is where opportunities were being had. So just women were being just outright excluded. Not saying that anybody was looking to the women and telling them you can't come, but I mean, just the culture was not inviting for, it just wasn't quite neutral enough, So that's a really good example of trying to fit in and trying to be something that you're not, trying to appease and appeal, and in doing so, losing your own voice, losing your own way, losing your authenticity, and I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment here, and let's pretend that I'm the CEO of a big corporation, and I'm open minded, and I'm hearing what you're saying, Isabel. But what would you tell me as a leader to convince me that I should care about the benefit of embracing more feminine energy in leadership in my organization? Why should I care about that? And how is that going to benefit me as the leader of a big corporation? What is that going to look like? And what kind of outcomes should I expect to gain if I were to pay more attention to this?
Yeah, and that's a very interesting question. Um, I think it just looks like we're not as exhausted when we're not trying. And again, like if that was your thing to go like to a strip leagues club or like maybe golf, if you're, I would be like, yeah, fine, do it. But the thing is, I think we have been tapping into something we're not, and then we are literally exhausted, and it takes so much energy that we're burning out. So it's just not sustainable in the way it is, the way it's working, I think. Not only because we're not bringing the best part of womanhood to the table and diversity, because at the end, like if we are just pretending to be something else, we're not even allowing ourselves to bring that side. But also, I think it's just not working for anybody in some way. It's only to retrieve this. And again, this is not only a female problem. I think it also has a side on on men as well, because these traits that we have rewarded for a long time as the good ones to have, like strong and sound, and be efficient and never rest and work hard and talk serious, so they respect you. This also influence into men that are not that way, because there are men that are more friendly or more sweet, and that they also have this like negative feedback in some way, like having to change. So it's not only a female problem. I think it's a social problem, just accepting this other side that we haven't balanced, and how it would look, I think, if we are into our side and we bring the best of us into our work. This can only improve corporations, it can only improve organizations. But yes, it's a very difficult thing to say, and usually I work on the other side. I work more on the women's side, and I'm like, okay, we cannot change the system, but we can empower ourselves, and we can hope that that influence to a change. So we can really stand on who we are. I am sweet and I am strong, and then that doesn't take me any strength. And by that way, building new models in some way, because what we think somebody is, we have these associations because of the things we have seen. So the more we have women that are showing us different things, and I remember one of the women of my community telling me that she started to wear red lipstick in her company, and she wants to be the girl that crashed the presentation with red lipstick. And I thought that that's so beautiful, because yeah, the more associations we have to those things, the more examples we have, like, okay, she's presenting with red lipstick, and it doesn't mean it was going to be any less of a good presentation. The more examples we have, the better, like the more that we actually modify those models that we have, and then we don't do that association. So usually I work on the other side of the system, on ourselves, like I don't know how it would take or what it would take for the system to shift, but from ourselves, I know that if we work in our inner barriers and in our limiting beliefs and in the things we have learned, and we and unlearn them, and we build the ones we want. So, for example, that one, I want to be the one that's smart and uses red lipstick. I think we do our part and we also influence, and then the other part also, the system is not something we can control, but we can do as much as to influence in some way.
Hmm. Um, so what do you think it would look like in terms of, the impact that it would have on a workforce, for example, the employees on teams, um, on the people that they lead, if we had more female and in terms of the energy that you're speaking about, because like you said, yes, it is true, it could be men who tend to be, maybe they lean a little bit more into their feminine energy, but tackling these stereotypes of I'm a leader, because uh, there are so many different types of leadership styles, and one thing I can tell you is that there's, you know some leaders are just borderline bullies, and they lead through intimidation, and that's very, very, aggressive, and that doesn't really work long term. um, but what do you think would be the benefit if we were to give more space to, really focus on trying to embrace and even foster this shift? How would that look? So you've talked to me as a leader. I played devil's advocate. You told me what the benefit would be to my company. How's that going to benefit me as an employee working in this organization that's going to adopt this more of a shift? What do I have to look forward to?
Yes, I think it's a bit what you were saying. I don't think we are at a point that is negotiable in some way because this model is not sustainable and is crumbling. It's like in a tower moment as well. Uh, so I think corporations now are at the place that they have to change because this is not working, and there is like the need of something that is more sustainable for the world, for humanity, and for everybody, for employees, for managers, and for the corporations itself. So we need to find new models that are more sustainable in some way, and this is outdated. It was created for another world in another moment, and it's really not working. So I think as an employee, there is a crisis as well in the employees. So there is all this quiet quitting, and there is also movement of Shen's said like not wanting to go into the corporate ladder. So that's why I'm saying I don't think it's optionable anymore. I think we are at a critical point where this has to shift. We really need to help it shift in some way. Um, but yes, as an employee, I think I would definitely be more encouraged to work for a company that balances all the traits and that is not forcing me to be something that I don't want to. And if I want, then it's okay. That's encouraged because, as you were saying, like they also have a problem when you sound aggressive. So, like if I want
Yeah,
to sound like that,
it's
that's
one or the
fine.
other. It's like, well,
Yeah,
you're too
one of
much of
the
this, you're too little of that, and then you change,
exactly.
and then it's like, oh no,
Yeah.
no, not like that. No, 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 that's. So we're about out of time, but I just want to, I in a couple of minutes, and this is a great segue. And thank you so much for sharing all of your insights and explaining further about the masculine energy, the feminine energy, and the benefit of that. So speak to me really quickly, not quickly, but to just speak to me about what you mean when you talk about heart led leadership. I love that phrase, and I want to hear more about that.
Yes. Yeah, so it's a bit what we have talked until now. In some way, I help women. Even my program is called Becoming Her, and I help them to bring themselves back to their career. So bring all the traits, all your strengths, and really like um, yeah, bring that authenticity to your work that makes yourself, and really like stand into, like as I told you, like I'm sweet and I'm strong and I can be both, and can really embrace both sides of me. I'm spiritual and I'm corporate, and like I can be very mystical, I can be very practical, and really embrace those sides of you and stand in that possibility of having both sides, because we do, like women, usually we're multifaceted, and like usually we have this diversity of personalities and we can embrace them all. So it's kind of a leadership that comes from that side. It's a leadership that comes from this feminine side, into like nurturing relationships, into like leading from the heart, from like what we feel, and not from our head, and connecting with this intuition that we also have as women, and that we have been denying for a long time, because the intuitive is also part of this feminine, that has been really denied, even since witches time. So like really embracing those side of us and bringing them to our career, because they can be really powerful ways of advancing into our career in a different way, but a way that feels more natural to us and that feels more authentic.
Wow, that's been incredible. I can't believe that it's already been an hour. And I have really thoroughly enjoyed this time with you today. And I just thank you so much. Um, is there any last parting piece of wisdom that you want to share with the audience, or even just, give a shout out for your program, what it's called, what it's about, where we can find you? And I'll get some information from you to link in the description below so people can reach out and learn more about your program. But any parting words for us that you want to say?
Yes. So thank you for having me here. It has been really lovely to talk to you. And yes, you can find me with my name, so www.isabelfonseca.com, and you can learn more about my story, my work, and my program as well. The program, as I said, is called Becoming Her. It's really opening in January. And in that program, I work for about 5, 6 months with women individually, but I usually take a group. We start and we end at the same time, and we work into this. We work into really breaking these inner barriers that we have around how we should be and how we should lead our careers and our teams, and starting to building new models that work better for us by knowing ourselves and by communicating that to the world as well. So it's kind of a confidence program, but confidence that builds from within to out to the world. And yes, it has been lovely to talk to you. And thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you again for being here. So, thank you for the audience out there for watching this episode of The Pivoting Wolf. I will link Isabel's information in the description. Please go check her out. I think that her program is wonderful and is beneficial. And I would say not only just for women, but for men as well. This is a great message for all of us to learn from. So, Isabel, with that having been said, thank you so much, and I bid you adieu. And I will see you next time.
Thank you.